Above its sad and lonely plains they bend on hovering wing, and ever o'er it Babel sounds the blessed angels sing. Yet with the woes of sin and strife the world has suffered long. Beneath the angels' strain have rolled 2,000 years of wrong. And man at war with man is not the love song which they bring. Oh, hush the noise, ye men of strife, and hear the angels sing. Follow the days all hastening on by prophets seen of old, when with the ever-circling years shall come the time foretold, when peace shall overall the earth its ancient splendors free, and the whole world give back the song which now the angels sing.
Good morning. Welcome to First Baptist Church in historic Tarboro, North Carolina. We are located on Main Street, right next to the post office. I am Ronnie Daughtry, and I will be teaching the adult Sunday school lesson for today, which is Sunday, November 29th. It is 8 a.m. in the morning. This is the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and the lesson is the 13th lesson and final lesson. This has been 3 months. God restores. And the lesson today is taken from Isaiah chapter 65, verses 7 through 25. We will be going through every verse, explaining it to the best of my knowledge. It is a wonderful chapter. Isaiah is a wonderful book of the Bible. He's my favorite prophet, as I have said before. And I want to welcome everyone that's watching on Channel 13, those streaming on YouTube. And somebody always puts it on Facebook, so wherever you are watching, welcome. This is a great lesson. It has a little bit of everything. Primarily, it is about the second coming of Jesus. It is about heaven. It is about the hope of the world. And the world needs to hear this lesson during this pandemic. I can't remember another time in our history when it was so important. Yesterday, I was shooting with some friends, and one of those was a former student, and we were talking about how time goes by, and how old we are, and how much has taken place, and how many people we have lost. But you know what? What I thought about later was we Christians, we have another hope more than just having a happy life, a joyful, happy time, peaceful time. We have the hope of knowing we have a future with Jesus Christ, with God, and no more tears, no more pain, and we will be with all those people, all the Christian people in our lives. We will be together for eternity. Wonderful lesson, and I hope that I do it justice today. If you look around, Rusty Kent is filming this, and I'm sure you can see the poinsettias. These are real right here. These are beautiful. But I want to dedicate this lesson today to all the people that came out this week and spent all this time making this place beautiful. And if you come today, you can actually see everything lit up. This beautiful Christmas tree with all the chrismons. Those chrismons have been made over a period of 40 years, and each one has a special meaning. And the Advent candles are here, and we'll be going through, of course, Advent for 4 weeks, and, of course, Christmas. And we have something that's never happened in my life before. Teaching Sunday school. I will actually be teaching the book of Luke during Christmas. The Christmas lesson will come from Luke. Now, the Christmas lesson is always from some part in the Bible, but I have never taught Luke, the second chapter of Luke, on actual Christmas time. So that's going to be really special. Okay, I want to tell you about other things going on today. John Rosal, Reverend John Rosal, will be doing the Hispanic lesson on TV at 9 o'clock, and then later at 10:30 downstairs in Friendship Hall. Dylan Nixon, who is our intern, who is a student in seminary in Chapel Hill right now, he will preach for Lamont Heminger, who is with his wife, Alicia, in Charleston, South Carolina, where her sister, Stephanie, is very sick, and she's in the hospital. And Dylan's wife, Krista, will be playing the organ for us, as she's been doing for several weeks. Come if you can. We will be practicing all the things to keep you safe, checking temperatures, being spaced out here, and please wear your mask. We will have everything here, place to wash your hands, everything that would help. Let's start with a prayer this morning. Heavenly Father, if it will be your will, please end the pandemic. We have had 9 months. It's been bad. A lot of people have died. A lot of people have been sick. Father, in my family of 11 people, 6 people have already had the virus. May everything done today be pleasing to you. May I say the right words. Maybe I teach. Maybe as we worship you in all the different ways, everything will be the way you want it to be. I want you to be with the people at the Albemarle. They've had a tough time during this pandemic. The quarantine's been really tough. And be with all our shut-ins. Be with the people we've been praying for. Be with Wilbur Joyner, Tommy Belch, Betty Lancaster, Don Watson, Benny Bale, Molly Baggett, and be with Sammy Gregg. He undergoes knee surgery December 7th. And anybody else that I have missed, be with them. And we ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, I'd like to start off the lesson today by kind of summarizing some of the stuff that has been happening over the last few weeks and how we got to where we are now. Let me say first that life, the challenges in life, especially now, can cause us to lose hope. If we're not careful, we will start to have bad feelings, be depressed about things. We say our best days are behind us. We talk about the good old days. When that happens, the present becomes darker and we can lose sight of the lessons that we can learn. The Bible teaches that the future should impact how we live in the present. Isaiah revealed to his audience, which was 2,700 years ago, he revealed to his audience glimpses of what God would do in the future so that they would be encouraged to be faithful as they wait on him. Hope in the future gives strength in the present. Now, keep in mind that Isaiah is a prophet. He was married, he had children. He was a member of the royal family. They don't talk about that very much, and so he had a chance to live in the palace. He did not have to work because if you were a member of the family of royalty, things were provided for you. But he spent his time teaching, preaching, because God had picked him for the most important job in the world. What was the most important job in the world? To announce that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was coming to earth. And all those other prophets that came to earth to try to make people change their ways, all the judges that we had, like Deborah and Samson, all those people, none of those people could actually change the world the way it needed to be changed until Jesus came. And Jesus changed the world. And he's still changing the world because he is the only hope. And he will come again. He was the Messiah. In Isaiah 61, the prophet said that the Messiah would come. In his first coming, he came to save his people. And then Isaiah says that he will come again a second time and he will vindicate his people. Isaiah 62 says the attention now shifts to Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem had been destroyed because of sin. Sin had separated God and his people in Jerusalem. But there will come a time when God would restore their relationship. Matter of fact, the lesson named today is called God Restores. The Lord would delight in Jerusalem like a groom delights in his bride. Isaiah 63 and 64 turn attention to God's judgment on the nations. And that brings us to chapter 65, 66, which is the last part that we're going to be talking about because it's the last lesson. The Lord answers the prayers of the people, and he promises to judge, and those people that worshiped idols and those people that did wrong will be punished, and the righteous people, that remnant, the chosen people, they will experience a new heaven and new earth. And we'll be talking more about that in the lesson today. So it's a great lesson, and it's one with a lot of hope. Now, the man that wrote this lesson, of course, Isaiah wrote the lesson from the Bible, but the man that wrote this lesson, his name is Brian Baer. He is a pastor, he is a professor, he's a writer, he is a former soldier, he went to Vietnam. We have been talking about him throughout this quarter, the last 3 months. And here is what he said about the lesson today, to introduce the lesson. Most of the people I know like to get something new on occasion. For example, I bought my first car when I was 17 years old. Granted, the vehicle had quite a few miles on the odometer. It was not a brand new car, but it was new to me. I had been working at a grocery store a year earlier to save enough money to buy a car of my own. So I was quite happy on the day I received the keys to my new car, new to me. Some people like shopping for new clothes. Others enjoy getting gifts at Christmas, birthdays, other special occasions. Still other people like gaining new experiences, traveling to an exotic location, taking a helicopter ride, deep sea diving, parachuting out of an airplane. I have a brother that spent more than 40 years in 82nd Airborne. He made 177 jumps, and he talks about the thrill of jumping. I never wanted to experience that thrill, but I know a little bit what he was talking about because I used to be a scuba diver, and that was always a great experience to be able to breathe underwater, and that was wonderful. And I understand what he's talking about traveling to places. Since my wife and I retired, we've had a chance to experience America, like Las Vegas and Hawaii, and foreign travel like Paris and Germany. We went to Oktoberfest in Germany. Well, we've had some experiences like that, like a lot of people have. But there will be nothing to compare with the new heaven and new earth that we're talking about in this lesson. Everything will be perfect. There will be no sin, no sorrow, no crying. There will be complete joy. And when people talk about happiness here on earth, they're talking about temporary times of pleasure. You bought a new car, as we were talking about. That new car smell is really nice, but it goes away. And the car gets dirty, and the car breaks down. All those things that bring you pleasure also have a time limit, just like your body. Your body has an expiration date. Everything will eventually not work. Your hearing, once you're born, the scientists say you start to lose your hearing. And if you live to be 120, everybody would be deaf because the hearing mechanism will not last. I learned that when I was teaching in college. A course I was teaching to nurses, physiology and anatomy. So Isaiah is telling us about how things will be, and he did this 2,700 years ago. And the guy that wrote this lesson is talking about why we need this lesson today, about having the peace for all eternity. Now, there are some things that Isaiah wrote that are very hard to understand, and I use a lot of Bible commentaries to help with that. And I ask the Holy Spirit to help me to figure out some things. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I ask Lamont, sometimes I ask John. Both of these guys really know the Bible. Let me just tell you one thing about John Rosal. We have a lot of Bible materials that somebody donated to the church, and I was trying to put them in order. I could show John a page of this material, and I could say, what book of the Bible did that come from? And he would know what it was by just looking at it. I don't know many people that can do that. Anyway, when I was writing this lesson down, I was trying to put down there how our life was and what was going on when I first studied this lesson. When I first read over this lesson, T.H. Boyd passed away, and I went to his graveside. And Mike Boyd, one of my former students, and a person that comes to this church, he was speaking about his father, and he was saying some things. And I had been going to that station more than 50 years. He mentioned that he started in that station when he was 7 years old when his daddy was there, and he would do odd jobs. And I tried to think. I could not think of one single thing that his dad had ever done that was not good. His treatment to me was always fair. He always charged less than I thought he would charge. One time he worked on my car, he charged me $1. And it was, I don't know, he just had to hook something together. What if everybody could be a Christian like that? That everybody treated you fairly, didn't overcharge you for things, and they treated you good. What if everybody could be that way? Well, guess what? Heaven is going to be better than that. Better than that. Okay, let's start going through this verse by verse and find out exactly what Isaiah intended for us to hear. Let me tell you a couple of things starting out that will help you understand. Shalom is the Hebrew concept of peace. Whenever somebody would greet somebody, they would say shalom. It meant peace be with you. Nowadays, we might say, hey, how's it going? Or good to see you. I hadn't seen you in a long time. You know, idioms that we use to greet and that kind of thing. Hebrew people, Israelites, they had different ways of saying things, but it would be things usually about peace. That was a very common greeting. Okay, I want to just point that out before we get to this. Okay, we're going to be reading today. Everything that we're going to be doing is going to be in the 65th chapter, chapter 65, and we're going to be doing verses 17 through 25. Now, that's just a few verses, but it has a lot of stuff in them. And one other thing I need to tell you, the city of Jerusalem is sometimes referred to as Zion, going to Zion. Jerusalem is kind of like on a hill, several hills, and sometimes they're like marching to Zion, going up the hill. So in songs and poetry, so forth, you will have that kind of language. So I'm just telling you that before we actually get to that. Now, we're going to start with verse 17. For I will create a new heaven and a new earth. The past events will not be remembered or come to mind. You know, one of my favorite parts of Christianity is the fact that when I commit a sin, when I ask God to forgive me, it is not remembered later. I still remember it, but God does not. And isn't that wonderful to know that once you ask Him to forgive you, you don't have to worry about it anymore? Now, we have a habit of not forgetting things, and we bring things up, and we'll remind other people things that they did. God does not do that. And I love that verse. And I think most Christians know that God erases those things, and you don't have to worry about those ever again. Now, the new heaven and new earth, we'll talk more about that later. Verse 18-19. Then be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating, for I will create Jerusalem to be a joy and its people to be a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people. The sound of weeping and crying will no longer be heard in her. Now you might say, well, if God if he loves Jerusalem and the people so much, why would he allow another country to conquer them, to kill people, to take exiles or slaves back to their country and make them work? Okay, and the answer is the people disobeyed God, they worshiped idols, and he punished them. And that is the name of that game. You do wrong, God will punish you. If you do good, God will reward you. It's just like a child being punished so that they understand. They understand when a child sticks a fork in an electrical socket and gets shocked, they don't do it again because it hurt. Well, that's the reason we punish children, is so they won't do that behavior again. Now let's go to verse 20. In her a nursing infant will no longer live only a few days, nor an old man not live out his days. Indeed, the one who dies at 100 years old will be mourned as a young man, and the one who misses 100 years will be considered cursed. Okay, there is a lot of things that are hard to understand in that verse. But I went through several different commentaries, and I can tell you what it means, what it actually means here. A long time ago, there were so many things that were wrong. When a child was born, a child may not live but a few days. There were just so many things, and people did not have doctors available. We know that Luke was a doctor, but things were pretty primitive, and people died. If you lived to be 70 in those days, it was considered good. And anything above 70 would be considered an old man, old woman. So what they're saying here is that all of this will change in the new heaven and new earth. You don't have to worry about babies. People will live because basically they're going to live forever. So all of those things that were happening before are not going to happen, and they will no longer be a problem. When I was in college, now this is something a little bit different, but this is my interpretation of it. When you die, you go to heaven. Okay, that's the way I understand it. When a Christian dies, he goes to heaven. Now, when I was in college, we were getting ready to graduate, and a fraternity brother of mine, his name was Eddie. Eddie's father was blind, totally blind. And just before we graduated, his father died. And he said to me one day, he said, Ronnie, I really wish my dad had lived. He wanted me so much to graduate from college, and I wanted him to see that. I said, was your dad a Christian? He said, yes. I said, well, the way I believe he's in heaven now, and I believe that he will see you graduate. And I said, and you know what else? He will see you graduate because he will not be blind. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, that's the way I understand it, that when you're in heaven, you'll be able to see if you were blind. And because I had been told that by a preacher. No, it may not be in the Bible, but I believe that it's that way. I had a friend that died relatively young. He was 39. And the last week of his life, I took my girls to see him in the hospital. I knew he didn't have very long. I talked to his doctor, Dr. Oranger, and he said, we're down to a few weeks, but actually it was a few days because I was with him on Thursday and he died on Sunday. But anyway, he said to me, that he wished that he could live, so he could see his boys grow up and all of that. And he said, I want you to be there and, make sure that they are good kids and they do well and all that. And I said, yeah, I will. And he said, if my wife needs something, check on her occasionally. I said, okay, I will. And, I took that serious. And over the years, I prayed for his family, and I checked on them, and they grew up, and they played sports, and they got married. And I felt like that he, being in heaven, he could see what was going on. I've always felt that. Some of you listening to my voice today, you may say, well, that's not in the Bible, I don't believe it. Okay, and you may be right, but I tend to believe different. Let's go to verse 21 and 22. People will build houses and live in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They will not build and others live in them. They will not plant and others eat. For my people's lives will be like the lifetime of a tree. My chosen ones will fully enjoy the work of their hands. There is some complicated stuff in that, and it took me a long time reading books, dictionaries, and stuff to understand this, but I finally figured it out. Okay, when they talk about a tree, like an acorn becomes a plant, and it grows to a tree. It gets bigger and bigger, and eventually you have these oak trees that are just huge. There's one in Wilmington that is hundreds of years old, and they say that the roots are as big underground as the branches are above ground. Okay. People go through a cycle, too, of babies, small, and then they grow big, and then they decline and so forth. We start shrinking and as we get older. What this is talking about is like when the Israelites went to the chosen land, they conquered the land. People that had farmland, okay, we took their land, we took their livestock, the crops, we took over their crops, okay? The vineyards, we took their vineyards because they were evil people, they worshiped idols, and they were either killed or they were run off the land and went somewhere else. Now you might say, well, that was terrible, taking their land. Well, God was punishing those people for not believing in Him, and He put His own people there. Now, His own people sometimes needed to be punished too. But when they're saying people built houses that they lived in. That's what they're talking about here. And the vineyards, you eat the fruit that somebody else did the work. And the same thing happened when God's chosen people were conquered. The same thing happened. You take Daniel. Daniel went to Babylon. He never had a chance to live in his own country. He had to learn a new language, and although he became very prominent, and there's a book in the Bible about Daniel, he followed God, he did not get to live in his own country. So that's what the verse is talking about. Now I want to stop at this point, and I want to tell you, it's not a story because it actually happened, okay? It actually happened. We're talking about people living in places where they don't like what's going on, this kind of thing. This is a true story. A man named William Booth, he lived in England, London, and he was teaching a Bible class at the East End of London. The East End of London was a pretty rough place. He says that every fifth building was a pub, a bar. We would call it a bar, a place to drink. Some bars had steps that were so small children could climb up and order a drink, like beer. Each time he went, Booth saw the same men there, drinks in hand, wasting the day away and their families' financial resources. He became indignant about this, and he decided to open up a Christian mission in the middle of the area where the bars were, the pubs, where the rough people lived. In 1865, he talked about Jesus on the streets here where those people lived, and the churches there did not understand what he was trying to do. Churches are not supposed to be organized in places like that. But he went where the people were. And all the churches opposed Booth so strongly that he had a hard time with the church. But he found a few people that went to his church that supported him with money. And he talked to people, he talked about Jesus, and he started, the church grew. And he started teaching about salvation in Jesus. And of course, it grew and grew. And now this church is all over the world. Have you guessed the name of this church yet? I'm sure you have. Salvation Army. And it is treated like an army, and the people have like army names, like colonel, captain, and so forth. And they wear uniforms. And it's like onward Christian soldiers. Yes, it is. Well, God had a similar experience with Israel. He called them to see what he was doing, and they ignored him. They went about their daily routines, and they did all these rituals unaware that God wanted something different. He wanted a personal relationship. He did not want a facade. He did not want rituals. He did not want people to fast and pray in public and try to impress him. He wanted people to love him, to pray to him, to help their fellow man, to give clothes to people that needed them, to feed people that were hungry, to help people that were injured, like the Good Samaritan. He did not want people to go through the motions. You know, and we're the same way today. We want people to be genuine in what they do. And this story I'm going to tell you now is not really a story. It's actually something true that happened, but I want to tell it pretty much the way it happened to me. Here it is. The guy that wrote this book, he had a story in here that was fiction, but the story I'm going to tell you is true. It's absolutely true, and it's better than the story in this book, and it was about me and my team. I had a football coach who I would say, being honest, he's dead now, so I could just say he was dumb, but he knew football. But he was supposed to teach other classes. Like I can remember in health class one time, he would, I was the smartest one in the class, and he would say, Daughtry, I'm having a little trouble with this. One time this is what he said, and he said, this is a hard word, I don't know this word. And he said, I think it's fatigue. And I said, well, Coach, I called him Coach because he was my football coach. Coach, you remember that time that you were having trouble with a word, and remember you said you didn't have time to study words much in college because you went there to play football? And you remember that word you had, it was compromise? You remember that word? And I told you that you were not saying it the right way. It was called compromise. You remember that day? Well, this is another one of those really hard words, and you're saying it the way it looks, but it's wrong. It's not fatigue, it's actually called fatigue. It means be tired like that. So, Coach, do you see what I'm talking about? Well, I think you can understand that what I was dealing with here. But this coach, he may not know much about, teaching, but he knew football. And we were getting ready to play our last game as seniors, and it was our rival school, and it was tough. They were ranked, and they were like one of the best teams in the state. And we were going to play them. The weather had turned cold, which was kind of unusual because usually the weather was not real cold for a football game. We hated this team because this team had beaten us before. And we were seniors. We would not have a chance to do it again. Well, our coach did two things the week before the game. He started saying, their coach's name was McClenny. He said, McClenny, I had coffee with McClenny the other day, and he said that we were a bunch of cow pasture ball players. And somebody said, what do you mean? He said that the way we learned to zig and zag on the football field was because we were dodging cow droppings in the pasture, and that's where we learned football. He called us a bunch of hick farmers and all that. So our coach, I knew what he was doing. He was getting us madder and madder as we faced this better team. But you know what? I understood what he was doing, but he also did something else. He said, guys, I want you to picture the future. You are seniors, and you played your last football game, and you beat the best team in the state. Can you imagine how your reunions would be later? You'd be talking about how you beat this team. And I had something else going on. I had a former girlfriend that was going with one of the players on that team. I was a linebacker, and he, at that time, was a halfback because we were doing T formation. Today he would be called a running back. He was their main runner. So I had visions of hurting him to teach him a lesson for being with my former girlfriend, which was kind of stupid, but anything that motivates you. Well, guess what? He did get hurt in the game. I was not the one that did it, but he got hurt in the game. And guess what? We beat the better team, and we did have those memories later. For years and years, we still talk about it. And that was more than 50 years ago. Now, when we got back on the bus to go back home from that game, because it was an away game, I said to the coach, I understood what you were doing. I said, none of that stuff was true about Coach McClenny talking about us. None of that was true, was it? No, I made it all up. I said, I knew it. I said, but you know what, Coach? You will not be able to do that again because we know your tricks. He said, you know what, Daughtry? You won't be here. You're a senior. You'll be gone. He said, I can do this all the time because, people, they'll be gone. And I could see that he was probably smarter than I was in some things. Nowadays, I doubt he could get a job in a school. But all of that proves a point. If you have a vision of something, how it could be, we played better because he got us mad, and he showed us a future vision of how things could be. We outplayed the other team because we were more motivated, and we overcame some deficiencies. I can't explain it to you. I can just tell you we won the game. Well, Isaiah is saying, you know what? There is a great vision of things to come that's going to be wonderful. And that's what he is saying. And I hope that little story would help you understand that whole thing. Verse 23 says, and they will not labor without success or bear children destined for disaster, for they will be a people blessed by the Lord along with their descendants. No more worry about children dying. No more worries at all. Even before they call, I will answer. While they're still speaking, I will hear. That verse, when you're married to somebody and you can almost tell what they're going to say because you've been in that thing so many times before, so many times that same phrase, and you can almost tell what that person will say. I think that's what that really is saying right there. The wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lamb will eat straw like cattle, but the serpent's food will be dust. They will not do what is evil or destroy on my entire holy mountain, says the Lord. Okay, here's what that means. It means that things are changing. The wolf and the lamb, during this time, the wolf will not be a predator. The lamb is very timid, but at this time, it'll be like the animals were on the ark. They will not hate each other. The lion will eat straw like cattle. In other words, a lion will not be a meat eater, a predator. But the serpent, who is the devil, his food will be dust. Why dust? Because he will be crawling on the ground eating dust, because he's a snake, a serpent. They will not do what is evil. In other words, even animals will be peaceful. What they're trying to do is to tell you the times are changing. Where things were this way, they will be different. In God's new heaven and new earth, things will follow different rules. People will live forever. Joy is forever. Happiness is not temporary. Happiness is forever. Peace is forever. There's no more wars. That's a wonderful way to end these lessons. Let's pray. Father, help us to have the hope that Isaiah is talking about here. Help us to live our Christian lives, to love and worship you. And then when we've lived that good and faithful life, you can say to us, good and faithful servant, you have served me. Welcome to my heaven, this place for you that is provided. If you do not know the Christian life today, please find out. Talk to somebody and ask God to come into your life. Then you will be able to say, God, forgive me of these sins, because I truly want to love you and worship you, and I want to have this peaceful and fulfilled life. And we ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ. I hope you have enjoyed the lesson today. I hope you've enjoyed these 13 weeks of Isaiah. And next week, we will be starting Luke. So tune in.